When we speak about spiccato, it's as if we're speaking about kung fu or karate. Means the name kind of tells the style, but there are many sub-styles that differ from each other. And there are also different styles in spiccato, different techniques inside the technique of spiccato. And that's why this technique is very hard to master. So in this video, I want to go through the different types of spiccato and the different speeds, which are also types of spiccato. So let's start by differentiating between the first types, which is a parallel and an arch spiccato. So the parallel spiccato is basically when I'm dropping the bow and I'm basically going with the same direction of the bow with the arm or the wrist, or together, arm and wrist and arm. We'll speak about it in a few minutes. But basically, this spiccato is a bounce. And we continue to bounce, give it momentum. So, and basically, the jump is in a kind of a U shape, but the bow maintains kind of a parallel line. If you look at the edge of my bow, it's kind of creating a little smiley, yeah? And if you look at the stick is doing this, but the stick is staying on the same angle. And if I slow down, okay? Now, in this parallel style of spiccato, you can do it by having it moved mostly by the arm with a bit of a wrist. So I'm using my arm and the wrist is just an aftershock, and then I bring it back the same way. So first the arm, then the wrist, then the arm, then the wrist. Or when it gets faster, I use much more the wrist. But what's important is that I'm still using the same direction of the bow towards the, with the spiccato, as if I had a huge bow going one line. So that makes the bow go this way. And this is, I call it the parallel jumping spiccato. There are different names for it. You can find it out. You can also make up, because there's no rules for that. So now the next one is an arch spiccato. And this one is a little different technique as we approach the string. Instead of just bouncing it on a point, what we curve the bow on the string. If you look at the edge of my bow, it's arching. It's not creating a U anymore, it's kind of creating a nervous arch. And the reason we're doing this, it happens, is because the bow itself is actually is arched over, back and forth on the string. And usually an arch spiccato will be a little rougher, but easier to do. And it is much more a wrist. It's a small movement, and it's a wrist oriented than an arm. An arm will not feel. You won't be able to accomplish it. So it's really only wrist with a bit of arm. So you can, of course, go from one to another, but this is important that you differentiate the movements. They're very different movement. One is a movement that is basically continuing the line of the bow, while another is actually breaking the line of the bow. A lot of people who want to learn the arch bow will start with basically playing on two strings, stay on one string, and reach the place where it loses the balance, and that's your bouncing point. So this is incredibly important to differentiate. Then in those two categories and subcategory comes the speed. The speed is really important to us, and one of the biggest mistakes that students and professionals or anyone does is that they change the speed of the spiccato. The spiccato is not, they want to jump in a certain speed, it doesn't work, and instead of changing where they are or changing the type of spiccato they have, they change the speed, and that usually ends up in the disaster. So what you want to know right now, work on is fixing the speed with where the bounce is going to be on the bow. So basically, the slower the bounce is, the lower it is on the bow. The faster it is, the higher it is on the bow. And the slower the bounce is, the more we use bigger movements. And then as we speed up, we contain ourselves, the movement becomes smaller. And so we're also starting to do the movement from much more closer to the bow. So the first speed, let's say, is the individual bounce. This one, we use that a lot in many times, playing second violin or playing the sonata when we're, basically becoming the second voice to the piano. And we're just, each individual's bounce is basically held and basically drawn down. So I'm actually controlling each one. And it's basically a lot of arm with a bit of, the arm comes first and the wrist comes after. Oh, that's a classic. Then comes what I call the semi-automatic. It's not politically correct, but this is a semi-automatic bounce, which means that I'm basically bouncing. I'm starting, and then basically I'm just keep on going, and I don't think about each individual bounce. I'm just I'm just basically let every 4 or 5 or 8 or 6, I'm basically giving it a little extra oomph, extra push, but basically it's the momentum that makes it. And this one you can do either by the arm or the wrist or the arch. You can do it. You just need to find where you are on the bow and according to the speed. So if I'm playing, this is not working, I go a little higher. And if I'm not choking with my first finger, I will find where the bouncing point is. And the last one is the incredibly fast spiccato. That's sometimes we use the word sautiller. It's really just a kind of a finger tremor. You almost never use it, to be honest. It's nice that we can have it and you should be able to do it, but we almost never use it. So we should concentrate really on number 1 and 2, and the third one is like just several bows to a note on a scale will do the trick. So basically, let's just recap for a second. There are basically 2 kind of spiccatos: the parallel spiccato, where the bow is going parallel to the line of the between 2 parallel lines above the string, and the arch one, which is basically cutting that kind of line. And inside the parallel one, you have an arm with a bit of wrist, or a wrist with a bit of arm. So I hope that clarifies everything, and if not, give me a shout.